zero in your mind.
Yes, sir.
Speed.
I got you.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, hello. My name is Gerald. I'm a member of Liberated Lens, an active collective at Omni Commons. And I'm fortunate to have in the studio with me right now Sister Caitlin Manning and Brother Joe Bender. They together are a team that has filmed a number of vignettes. Is that correct to call it vignettes? Or
You could call it a vignette. They're short films.
About another dynamic in Mexico that I'm sure you'll be interested in. This is called Resistance in Mexico.
Yeah, Dispatches from Resistant Mexico is how we're calling this short
Okay,
series.
now let's just hold it a minute, make sure everybody's on board here. We're saying dispatches, so that's what you're sending out. Resistant Mexico. Who is Resistant Mexico? What does that mean to you?
Well, there's all kinds of resistance going on in Mexico, and a couple years ago I started to become aware of it. There's an author, Raul Zibeki, who writes about these things all over Latin America, actually not Mexico. He says there's tens of thousands of points of resistance involving over a million people, like throughout these countries. So, and I learned of them I got wind of things a couple years ago. I went to a conference, and there was all these accounts of these movements throughout Mexico, and I was surprised that I hadn't heard of this before. And it just seemed like these are really serious, like very radical, anti-capitalist, anti-neoliberal points of resistance happening throughout the country. And even we in the sort of radical left milieus don't know that much about it. And so that would pique my interest. I grew up in Mexico City. I've made a couple films in Mexico before, and so it became my project. And that's my project for the foreseeable future.
Okay,
is to
so
sort
we're
of
gonna
follow these
see
things.
what
So
you
yes, so
have
there's a
to
series
offer.
there's a series of 4 shorts that have been made over the past year and a half. One of them is about the National Congress, National Indigenous Congress, which is an organization, Congreso Nacional Indígena, which is an organization which works very closely with Zapatistas, trying to link up all these different struggles which are happening throughout the country. There are struggles against mega projects, as they call them, like mining projects, highways, tourism projects, dams. And there's also a whole very interesting and serious resistance against paying high electrical fees.
Oh, yeah.
There's towns all over Mexico which just don't pay electrical bills anymore. They've organized themselves. And yeah.
Oh.
So
Wow.
there.
And
That's
you telling me this is not on our news? The best news on the planet Earth?
right.
They
Little
got the
too
best
threatening.
cameras. They got all the money, and they got the corporations behind them.
Right.
And they're not reporting this vital information.
Right. I mean, and that's, of course, nobody's surprised at that. But also, there's it's also not even like, as I say, even those of us. I mean, we were involved in Occupy Oakland. I bet a lot of people in Occupy Oakland wasn't. Oops. Maybe you'll have to cut that out. What's remarkable is that there's so many ways that our struggles are different, but there's so many ways also that we have things to learn from the ways that they're struggling. They're adopting these. There's a couple things that I think are really particularly important. One is this idea of autonomy, which and the idea of like creating your own territory and trying as much as possible to kind of disconnect from the forces of capitalist institutions. The Zapatistas have gone the furthest with this because they actually have, huge parts of the states of Chiapas where they run their own. They completely self-govern. They run their own schools. They have their own justice system, which they have built from the ground up, and they refuse any government intervention or support.
And they produce in these pockets of resistance under Zapatista control. They produce like coffee? What do they produce
They do.
that they sell?
Well, I mean, much of the production is just, subsistence agriculture is a good part
Oh,
of
so
it.
they produce and then they eat what they produce.
They pretty much, yeah, eat mostly what they produce. They do also produce coffee and sell that and on the market, like through kind of sympathetic groups. Often, people who support the Zapatistas will buy their coffee and bring it up to. There's a couple local coffee stores in San Francisco that sell the Zapatista coffee.
I've seen it.
But so this is going on in Zapatista territory, but this movement has had a huge impact way beyond the Zapatista territory, and that's what you're going to see in the shorts. We don't actually film in Zapatista territory. Actually, the first short does take place partly in one of the territories, but the other ones focus on groups, movements, individuals who kind of partake of this general resistance sort of ethos and practice. In other parts of mostly we're working in Chiapas and also in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is in the state of Oaxaca.
Let me answer this question. Is there any echo of this activity that you're discussing now, let's say on the college campuses in Mexico?
Well, sure. I mean, that's a completely different environment. But yes, there's a history of autonomy on college campuses, which gets.
Supporting the autonomy of these
Yes.
particular
Yes.
resistance.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of support
Resistors.
among the students of the. There's
There
a lot
is.
of mutual support. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
The Zapatistas came out in defense of the recent strikes of the teachers in Mexico.
Yes, they did.
They
Yes,
come.
they did.
They came out very early on, supporting the parents of the murdered youngsters in Ayotzinapa.
Yes, they did. I noticed that. Let me ask. Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
What you doing with that camera in your hands? What you doing? What made you interested in getting involved in this project?
Well, yeah, but, I'd heard about the Zapatistas, and Caitlin came back and said, well, this is all fine and good, but there's all these other things going on, and people that I'm close with up here in the States, we're all looking for a way to exit capitalism, to get out of that grind, that system, and people down in Mexico are doing it, and that's, to me, that's fascinating. To your question about the kind of connection between universities and some of these resistance movements, one of the shorts we're going to screen features some architects from Mexico City, student architects who have come down to help people in around Juchitán, which is a city that was devastated by an earthquake last
Okay, got
yeah. Help them rebuild these traditional ovens and kitchens. So there is, there's some movement back and forth between, cities, urban
So
environments,
other
students.
working people
Yeah.
in Mexico know about what you're going to be teaching us about when you show your film.
Yeah, there's sort of connections and networks throughout Mexico, and so one of the things is autonomy, and the architects were helping these Juchitecos rebuild their ovens. I should say, in this part of Oaxaca, in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, a lot of the sort of survival revolves around these huge ovens where the women bake all kinds of goods and then they sell them on the streets. It's a big, it's a
these
key
are
part of the
big ovens.
culture.
So tell me a
it's
little bit
big-
about the oven now, because I was
You'll see it in
tripping.
the movie.
Okay.
It's more interesting to see than to hear about.
Okay,
But
I'm curious about the ovens. Okay.
Yeah, they're very cool, and as I say, like they're key to the sort of culture of the Juchiteco culture, and they got destroyed during the earthquake. So a number of forces came together to help rebuild. One was this organization, which is a very long name, but it's basically the Assembly of Juchitecan people, and a bunch of indigenous groups that are active throughout the area. And one of the main things that they've been doing has been fighting the wind farms. And that's another documentary short is about the green capitalist wind farms. we all think wind farms sound great and cool.
Why would you fight
but
a wind farm? What's
because
wrong
they're
with a wind farm?
because they're being implemented in this this massive corporate mega project. They're completely destroying the agriculture, even possibly the underground water ways, even possibly changing the weather. They're a very, very destructive force in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, and they're being pushed by huge mega corporations, international, transnational
I
capital.
gotta hear. Wait a minute now. 'Cause I gotta hear the argument on that because I am skeptical. Can I say? Because I kind of think that one, I'm interested in these people not paying their electricity bill. I want to get with them. I want to learn how you do that because it would just seem they cut the damn electricity off.
Well, I mean, that short is yet to come. But the story there is that in the towns that are organized, and many of these are somewhat remote areas, the people come and try to cut the electricity off, and they band together.
Oh, somebody's
and don't
there
let
waiting
them
for
It's
them. They got
direct action, exactly.
They
It's
got
some
a
really
visiting
serious
party.
direct action. And it's
Okay.
even, and I should say another factor that I think is very important in the current autonomy struggles is the role of women. I mean, the Zapatistas were one of the first organizations that I know of, revolutionary organizations, to explicitly support the equality of women and the participation of women in sort of public life and in the sort of governing roles of the community. And I think that that's also been really key, and that's an effect that and that has had a dramatic effect on these movements, these other indigenous movements throughout the area, the role of women.
Slow down a minute because I hear a term being used a lot, and but I'm not so sure if people really grasp what it means. When you say indigenous, I might say, well, hell, I'm indigenous. I was born here, whatever. What do you mean by that?
Well,
term?
the indigenous movements in the area. Well, there's in the area in Chiapas. Let's talk about first. There's mostly Mayan descendants, and many of them have they've had both this strange advantage as well as the terrible disadvantage of being completely marginalized by the capitalist sort of economy and state. So they have been living in these traditional villages, since before, some of them since before colonization. A lot of times the places where they're now living are places they've had to move to. But they're organized in these traditional forms, which is they run their villages through an assembly that every person, well, now more women, at one time it was mostly men, and still is mostly men, but that's a struggle that's ongoing. But so these assemblies govern what happens in the town. They decide everything from, okay, we're going to get together and not pay our electric bill, and we're going to be organized when they come to town to fight them off, to, so-and-so is accused of stealing a chicken, to, what roads need to get paved in the town. And they have a certain degree of legitimacy in the Mexican Constitution.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
So you're telling me, well, my little pea brain is spinning now, so I'm thinking this is a rather parallel phenomena to what we see, for instance, in northern Syria, in the areas
Rojava.
that are.
Yes, very
you-
much so.
Okay.
I think that definitely Zapatistas and the Rojava experiment have very much in common, and that the ideas and the principles of those two movements have had an effect even beyond, in Mexico for sure, even beyond the Zapatista territories, which are run in many ways. It's very similar to the Rojava experiment, and the Rojava also has these clearly. I mean, I would say that's the second movement I have ever heard of, revolutionary movement, which has very explicitly placed the participation of women very high up on the agenda. Number one on the agenda of the political emancipation program. And so, yeah, there's a lot of similarity, and there is contact. We just came on our recent trip. We went to this amazing event. It was a women's gathering organized by Zapatista women in this remote part of the jungle of southern Chiapas, in the highlands of Chiapas, and 8,000 women, 2,000 Zapatistas, 6,000 women from around the world attended it. The Rojavans were invited, but they got turned away at the border for being terrorists. Got turned away by the Mexican government for being terrorists. But but so yes, there are links. There's both movements see each other as being sort of brother sister movements, and there's a lot of similarities. And I think number one, the role of women, the role of nature, the attitude towards nature, the non-Western attitude towards nature, and the assemblyist, you could say, this form of self-government, which is very participatory, and which tries as much as possible to remove itself from
And
the
all
state.
of this is in these films.
No, I mean little bits of it are in these films. You can put it together. The first film actually lays out the kind of the autonomous indigenous project through the stories of various people and their projects.
Okay.
The second one is about the struggle against the wind farms, and the people who are fighting against the wind farms are organized along similar principles, and they're also part of the organization that is described in the first one.
Oh man, I got curious now. I want to see.
The-
I might slip and go see that out. Well, okay, so let's.
So you want me to tell you the last two, what they're about, just
Sure,
briefly?
of course. Of
Okay,
course.
so the third one is about we took a little detour in our filming to support the people in Juchitán who are reconstructing after the earthquake. And that's a particular
The ovens, you mean?
The ovens. That's the
Okay.
oven one, and you see again, people are with the same principle. They're trying to organize themselves as much as they can, not depending on the market, self-subsistency. They're trying to revive communalist forms of organizing. And then the last one is a different tack. It's a portrait of an indigenous woman who considers herself part of the resistance. She explicitly says, "I'm part of the resistance," which means that she doesn't accept any government benefits. She doesn't accept anything from the government. But she's a potter. She lives in an indigenous town called Amatenango del Valle, which is in Chiapas also. And she talks about how she kind of found her dignity as a woman, and at the same time how she became politicized. And so that's her story, which is very much influenced by the role of the diocese, the Catholic diocese, which is going to be very surprising to many people, but the role of the Catholic nuns and has been extremely important in the emancipation of women in Chiapas.
Yeah, wait a minute. I mean, all right. I know that there are some who really don't know, but there is something called liberation theology,
right. That's
and
that
so
movement.
I mean, that's not absolutely new, but I'm interested to see how this plays out. I want to make sure that people understand where this is going, where these two films are going to be shown. So let's not lose it. Let's not go losing it.
Omni.
That's right. At the Omni. By the way,
Where else?
the Zapatista support group is one of the collectives at the Omni.
Yes.
And are you doing it in conjunction with them?
Well, I'm
I think they're co-sponsoring.
yeah, they are. They're co-sponsoring. They will be at the event. They will be talking about.
So I bet you they're gonna bring some food and stuff, huh?
They might be bringing food. They will definitely bring artesanias. They sell things in support, particularly in support of schools in the Zapatista territories. They are very engaged with that project. They take people down there. They raise money. There's an amazing blog that they translate and republish things in English, documents from the Zapatistas, documents generally from these movements
Name of the
that I've
blog,
been talking
please.
about. It's called Compañero Manuel blog.
.org or not just .blog?
It's on the Chiapas Support Committee.
Yeah, that's the best
It's on their
website.
website. Okay.
On their
Yeah.
website.
So how do you get to their website? It is
Chiapas Support Committee. Just Google that. You'll get there.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, but
They do
let's get to
amazing
the
work.
Omni now. The address of the Omni is 4799 Shattuck in Oakland, northern Oakland. It's very easy to get to, and the films are going to be shown.
April 29th at 7 o'clock.
Okay, April 29th. That's not this Sunday, but the following Sunday
At 7 o'clock,
at
yeah.
7 o'clock at the Omni, April 29th, 7 o'clock. Sounds very interesting. This is some, we always see, they pick subjects for us to pay attention to.
Right.
okay, the United States bombed Syria to stop them from using poison gas, but they never proved that poison gas was used in the first place. So what's going on here? No one knows. It's sad. But here is an opportunity to see a community functioning without the support, not only of the United States, but of their own government, independent of their own government. Sounds interesting. I'd like to see what this looks like. Okay.
All right.
Do you guys have anything else to add?
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
well,
I think we're good.
yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
All right.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
All right.
Thank you, Joe.